Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story sees a continuation in this twisted and terrifying series by my good friend CarlB1961 over on Reddit No Sleep. As ever, please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help with the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story. Entitled, I'm trapped in my house. Something is in here with me. I think I'm in hell. Part 5. Let's get straight into that. Darkness filled the kitchen. On the other side of the table, Kate uttered a short, startled scream. I was utterly black. I couldn't see my hand an inch away from my face. Panic clutched my heart in iron fingers. I struggled to remain calm, to think clearly. Stay where you are, I told Kate. I'll get a flashlight. I fumbled my way blindly through the dark, arms held out in front of me, aware of any obstacles that might be in my way. The once familiar dimensions of my kitchen were now alien to me, and I was deeply scared, convinced at any second my hands were going to encounter something solid standing directly in front of me, feel their way up to a long bony snout and a mouth full of sharp teeth. Then I would look up and find myself peering into two burning red points of light glowing in the darkness, looking down at me. I bumped into the counter and felt my way along it, counting the drawers until I came to what I was pretty sure was the one that held the flashlight and candles. I pulled it back and felt inside, candles rolling around. No flashlight. I suddenly remembered that I had left the flashlight in the foyer when I used it to look outside earlier that morning. Fuck! I snapped with frustration. What is it? Kate's voice asked from the darkness behind me. I left the flashlight in the foyer. Hold on. I took out a candle and the box of wooden matches. I took out a match and struck at a light and lit the candle. Its yellow glow dimly illuminated the kitchen. I turned to Kate as she looked back at me, her frightened eyes glinting in the light from the candle. Here, take this. I handed her the candle and then removed another one for myself and lit it. Well, let's go check on Adam and Chris, I said. She got up from the table and followed me out the kitchen, down the front hall. We walked slowly, careful not to cause a draft to blow out her candles. I was dead silent. I spotted a flashlight standing upright on the table in the foyer next to the phone. I grabbed it, blew out my candle, and clicked the flashlight on. I shined it into the living room first, and to our relief, Adam was still sound asleep on the couch, unharmed. Thank God, Kate whispered. We turned around to the closed den door. I felt a ripple of fear go through me. Not wanting to draw out the suspense any more than necessary, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the knob and pushed the door in, and then aimed the beam inside, half certain I was going to see that creature towering over what was left of my brother. Chris was still crouched over Annie's body, in the same position he'd been in when I left him. He was motionless, staring ahead into space with a desolate expression. He didn't react to the beam of light in his face and seemed unaware he'd been sitting in the dark. I exhaled in relief to see him still alive and in one piece. You all right? I asked him. For a long moment he didn't respond. I was starting to think that maybe he was in shock, and then he said in a cold, flat voice, For a man who just saw his wife get murdered by a demon from hell, yeah, I'm just great. Kate and I looked at each other and then back to him. She spotted his torn, bloody shirt and gasped, What happened? That thing clawed him, I explained. Chris, Kate said, Adam's asleep in the living room. You should come in there with us. It's not safe being alone. We have to stay together. What's the point? He said flatly. We're not safe together or alone. We're not safe anywhere in this house. That thing can pop up any second and there's not a goddamn thing we can do about it. Chris, she pleaded. Please, you're hurt. You need to have that looked at, and your son, he needs you. He's not my son, Chris said hollowly. And I'm not his father. He doesn't give a fuck about me. He just pretended to make his mom happy. And now she's gone. Chris, I said, we have to work together if we're going to get out of this mess. We have to figure out some way to stop that thing if it comes back. Well, he barked out a short, humorless laugh. Like what? Call a priest? In case you didn't notice, little brother, it's the end of the world and I think most priests are busy right now. Or dead. He turned and looked at me for the first time. His face was hard and his eyes full of bleak acceptance. We can't fight this thing. You saw that. It'd be suicide to even try. We can't just sit here and wait to be killed, I protested. And we can't fight a fucking demon with a shotgun, he shot back. Unless you got some double-aught silver buckshot lying around somewhere. I took a moment to think about what he was saying. I forced myself to accept it, to believe it, and push any logical arguments I still had to the contrary aside for the time being. There really wasn't any other explanation for what was happening. All right, I said. Let's say this thing is a demon from hell. That must mean there's some way to stop it. A Bible, holy water. You got any of those things on hand, Nick? He asked me cynically. I didn't answer him. Kate and I both atheists, and there were no religious objects in the house. Guess you forgot to pick up some last time you were at the store, huh? He chuckled bitterly and then shook his head. Christ, he said hopelessly, more to himself than us. We have to get the fuck out of here before that thing shows up again. But there's nowhere to go, Chris, Kate told him. How do we know for sure? He asked her. There's nothing but blackness outside, I told him. It's like the world just ceased to exist. But did you actually check to be sure? Did you try going outside? No. Well, he stood up. Well, now's the time to find out. He walked out of the den, past me and Kate, and went to the front door, opening it to the wall of darkness on the other side. Well, he studied it for a few seconds. He reached into the pocket of his jeans and withdrew a handful of change. He tossed the coins through the door, and to my surprise, I heard the slightly muffled sound of them clinking to the ground. Well, that answers that question, he said. At least now we know we're not floating in some formless void. The Earth's still out there. But is it safe to go outside? I asked him. That's a better question. Well, he was silent for a moment, looking out into the blackness, lost in thought. Yeah, it is. There's only one way to be sure. Well, he turned to us. I'm going to go out. I'm trapped in my house and something is in here with me. I think I'm in hell. Part 6. Let's get straight into that. Chris told us his plan. He was going outside on a trial run and attempt to reach his pickup truck, which was parked in front of the garage. If the truck was still there and he made it back safely, we would wake up Adam, head out, pile into the truck, and drive away. Where exactly we were going to, we had no idea. If this thing was happening all over the world, and indications were it was, based on what we had seen on TV, there wasn't anywhere we could go to get away from it. But if we're going to die, he told us, I'd rather die trying to do something instead of just waiting with my thumb up my ass for it to come to me. Both Kate and I argued, trying to talk him out of it. I pointed out to him that the blackness was as thick as smoke, and even with the truck's headlights, we wouldn't be able to see far. Plus, who knew what could be lurking out there in the dark where we couldn't see it? "It ain't any safer in here than it is out there," he retorted. "Chris, what if there's nothing out there at all except for this house?" I asked him. "There have to be other houses, other people trapped like we are," he reasoned. "We can't be the only ones. Maybe if we're lucky we can find a hospital or an army outpost or an emergency shelter. We gotta roll the dice on this one, guys. We don't have any other options." "You're taking a hell of a chance," I told him flatly. "Do you guys have a radio we can listen to?" he asked me and Kate. "We know the TV's fucked up, but maybe there's still a station on the air that can tell us something." "Yes, there's one in the hall closet," Kate said and went to retrieve it. She came back and handed the small, portable AM/FM radio to Chris, who turned it on. We heard static hissing over the speaker. Chris turned the tuner knob, sweeping across the band, and we heard only static from one end to the other. "Shit," he muttered. "Wait," Kate said. "Go back." "What?" he said. "I thought I heard something just then. Go back." He carefully dialed back a little, and we heard something through the static. At first I thought it was just the distorted sound of the radio interference, but as we listened, I realized it was something else entirely. Moaning and wails, sounds of pure torture and anguish. What sounded like hundreds or thousands of them, overlapping a hellish cacophony of abject human suffering, a choir of the damned. And then, suddenly, a voice spoke, causing all of us to jump. It was an awful voice, a distinctly inhuman voice, low, deep and guttural. It made my blood run cold. That distorted, rancid voice said over the radio, "Yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for I am the thing that hides in the shadow of death." Then it chuckled hideously. All three of us shuddered and looked to each other, our eyes wide. Just then, a new voice came over the radio. A normal man's voice, speaking in an upbeat, jocular tone of an FM radio DJ, but nothing he was saying was normal. "Hey, what's up? I'm Tom Carroll, and you're listening to WHEL Radio 666, where we play all the best music, all the time. I don't know about you, but that song, it always makes me want to get out the vegetable peeler and skin my penis and put the shavings in my Alzheimer-afflicted mom's mashed potatoes. Up at the nursing home where the staff have been sexually abusing the residents and ritualistically sacrificing them in exchange for heroin. It's part of the CIA's plot to contaminate the atmosphere with airborne AIDS as punishment for our mindless obsession with the royal family. We got some great tunes coming up. My wife's head is boiling on the stove and my kids are still in the refrigerator begging me to let them out so they can be molested by Harry Potter. This next one is going out to Chris with a dedication from his wife.
Honey.
And then Annie's shrill, screaming, accusing voice came out of the speaker. "You let him kill me, you bastard! You didn't help me! You let me die! And waiting for you in hell, Chris gasped and threw the radio against the wall, smashing it to pieces. It fell silent. He stood there, panting for about a minute before calming down. "You're still going through with it, aren't you?" I said. "Unless you got a better plan," he answered. I didn't, and I knew I couldn't talk him out of it. He had made up his mind. "Chris, wait a minute," Kate said and hurried into the kitchen. She came back with some clothesline she had gotten from one of the drawers. "Tie this around your waist. We'll hold the other end. That way you won't get lost on your way back." "Good thinking," he said and did as she suggested. He stood there looking at the two of us, scared yet determined. "Okay, wish me luck." He turned to go. "Chris," I said. And he turned back, waiting for me to go on. Maybe I meant to say something more meaningful. Maybe I wanted to tell him that I loved him or apologize for how differently our lives had turned out. But all I could come up with was, "Watch your ass out there." He nodded. "I'll be back." "You want the shotgun?" I offered. "Nah, keep it." He took out a small LED flashlight and clicked it on. Not that it would do him much good in that thick blackness, and stepped outside, instantly disappearing from view. Kate held a clothesline, paying it out foot by foot as he walked further away. I estimated his truck was no more than 30 feet from the front door. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. And suddenly we heard a sound, faint and muffled by the dampening effect of the blackness had on the noise, but still clearly a scream of horror. My heart lurched in my chest. The clothesline Kate was holding was yanked rapidly through her hands, twisting and pulling to one side, then the other. "Oh God, what the fuck are you?" I heard my brother wail in terror from the dark, and abruptly the clothesline went slack in her hands, and my heart, it sank. My eyes met hers, and each pair was a mirror of the other's dread and fear and despair. And suddenly, Chris appeared in the doorway, materializing out of the blackness, and he was panting with horror, and his face was wild, but he was alive, and I felt my soul surge with relief. "There's something out there," he shouted. "It tried to grab me, Something reached out of the darkness behind him. I only glimpsed it for a second. It resembled a giant pair of insect pincers, grey and serrated and dripping foul black ichor. And they seized Chris, wrapping around his midsection, sinking in deep, nearly bisecting him. Blood gushed from him in a wave. He uttered a brief choked cry of surprise, and then was yanked savagely back and out of sight. It happened so fast. Neither Kate or I had time to react. The remaining length of clothesline was snatched from her grasp and followed Chris into the darkness. There was a muffled, unearthly roar from the distance, a thick, primordial cry, unlike anything ever made by a creature that existed on Earth. And then, only silence. I was too stunned to react. I stood there, staring dumbly into the void, and beside me I could hear Kate sobbing quietly. I felt compelled to call out my brother's name, but knew there would be no answer. He was gone. "Close the door, Nick," my wife told me in a trembling voice, and I felt a surreal sense of déjà vu. She had said the same thing earlier when I had first inspected the darkness that had swallowed us and consumed the world outside. And what felt like 1,000,000 years ago, although it had been only 3 hours. "Please, Nick, for God's sake, close it. I can't stand to look at it anymore." And I closed the door.